the 13th of August 2016. A quiet Saturday morning that would end with the most humiliating defeat in the history of American intelligence. Inside the fortified, windowless corridors of Fort Meade, the headquarters of the NSA, the silence was shattered not by an alarm, but by a simple tweet. A mysterious entity calling themselves the Shadow Brokers had just done the impossible. They didn't just hack a bank. They didn't just leak emails. They had broken into the digital armory of the United States government and stolen the cyber nuclear codes. They posted the NSA's most secret weapons tools with code names like Extra Bacon and Epic Hero Online for the whole world to download. It was like finding a loaded gun belonging to a police chief left on a park bench, inviting chaos. But the hackers didn't ask for mercy. They mocked the spies. They taunted the government in broken English. And then they vanished. As panic swept through the intelligence community, one terrified question echoed in the Situation Room. Who are they? Are they Russian spies, a traitor from within, or a ghost created by the internet itself? How did the world's most powerful agency get held hostage by a phantom? To understand the sheer magnitude of this crime, we must first look at the victim. For 2 decades, cybersecurity researchers whispered rumors about a phantom entity operating within the deepest layers of the global network. They were the apex predators of the digital ecosystem. Kaspersky Lab, the Russian antivirus giant, eventually gave them a name: the Equation Group. They called them this because their code was so complex, so mathematically perfect, that it seemed less like hacking and more like high art. But the Equation Group wasn't a criminal gang. They were the elite soldiers of the United States, specifically a unit within the NSA known as Tailored Access Operations, or TAO. TAO was the weapon the U.S. government used to spy on terrorists, foreign governments, and cartels. Their arsenal was comprised of 0 days, rare, undiscovered flaws in the software that runs our world. Microsoft Windows, Cisco routers, bank firewalls. TAO had the master keys to all of them. These tools allowed them to turn on your webcam, read your deleted messages, or shut down a power grid without leaving a single trace. They were the invisible gods of the internet, and gods do not believe they can bleed. This hubris was their fatal flaw. The NSA hoarded these digital weapons, believing they could keep them safe forever in their electronic vaults. They believed their fortress at Fort Meade was impenetrable. Then came the summer of 2016. The geopolitical temperature was already at a boiling point. Relations between Washington and Moscow were deteriorating. The U.S. election was on the horizon. The digital world was a powder keg waiting for a spark. Out of the blue, a WordPress blog appeared. The authors called themselves the Shadow Brokers. The name was a reference to a video game, Mass Effect, implying they were traders of information who held no loyalty to anyone. Their writing style was bizarre, a caricature of broken English that read like a bad Hollywood villain. They wrote things like, "We find many Equation Group cyber weapons." At first, the world laughed. It sounded like a prank, a scam. How could a random group of internet trolls possibly have breached the NSA? But then, the security experts looked at the free samples. The laughter stopped instantly. The code was authentic. It contained digital signatures that could only have come from inside the NSA's most secure servers. This wasn't a bluff. The Shadow Brokers were holding a gun to the head of American intelligence, and they were threatening to pull the trigger unless they were paid 1 million Bitcoin. The gods were bleeding, and the sharks began to circle. Panic is a cold sensation. Inside the NSA, the atmosphere was suffocating. The agency realized that the tools leaked by the Shadow Brokers dated back to 2013. This meant the enemy had been sitting on this stolen data for 3 years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The NSA's elite hacking unit, TAO, was ordered to stand down. Operations were frozen. The agency was effectively blinded. They had to assume that every single key, every single backdoor they had placed in foreign networks was now compromised. The FBI was called in immediately. The investigation was massive, aggressive, and shrouded in absolute secrecy. The first theory was a remote hack. Had the Russians breached the firewall? Forensic teams scoured the server logs, looking for digital footprints. They found a mistake. A careless operator had once left a staging server, exposed for a brief window of time. It was a theoretical entry point, but the volume of data stolen was too massive to have been siphoned off without tripping alarms. The investigators came to a darker conclusion. This wasn't a hack. This was a theft. It was an inside job. Paranoia set in. Every employee was a potential traitor. Polygraph tests were administered. Backgrounds were rechecked. They were looking for another Edward Snowden. Then, the crosshairs settled on a contractor named Harold Martin. Harold Martin was an enigma, a former naval officer, highly intelligent, but socially awkward. He worked for Booz Allen Hamilton, the same firm that employed Snowden. The FBI put him under surveillance. They watched. They waited. And on the 27th of August 2016, a heavily armed tactical team raided his home in Glen Burnie, Maryland. What they found stunned them. It wasn't just a USB drive or a laptop. Harold Martin was a digital hoarder. His house, his car, and his garden shed were filled with boxes of documents and hard drives. He had stolen 50 terabytes of data. For 20 years, he had been taking his work home, stuffing classified secrets into his pockets, and walking out the front door. Among the clutter, investigators found the source code for the very weapons the shadow brokers were leaking. The FBI breathed a sigh of relief. They had their man. They arrested Martin, charging him with theft of government property. The narrative seemed complete. The eccentric hoarder had tried to sell the secrets or had been compromised. The ghost was in chains, but the celebration was premature. While Harold Martin sat in a federal detention cell, cut off from the world, the shadow brokers posted again. A new message appeared on Twitter, a new dump of files, more fresh data. The broken English taunts continued, mocking the FBI's arrest. FBI is arresting wrong guy, the subtext screamed. We are still here. The investigators felt a chill run down their spines. Harold Martin was a criminal, yes, but he wasn't the shadow brokers. He was just a hoarder who got caught in the crossfire. The real phantom was still free. Attention shifted violently toward Moscow. Intelligence analysts began dissecting the shadow brokers' strange, broken English. Linguists argued it was a deliberate attempt to sound like a Hollywood stereotype of a Russian villain to distract from the truth. But the timing was too perfect. The leaks coincided with the accusations of Russian interference in the U.S. election. Was this the GRU? Was this retaliation? Or was it something even worse? Second mole? Someone high up in the chain of command, someone who was still sitting at their desk at the NSA, watching the chaos unfold and laughing. The shadow brokers escalated. They stopped playing games. They released EternalBlue, a cyber weapon so powerful it could compromise any Windows computer in the world within seconds. The NSA pleaded with the world to update their systems, but it was too late. The weapon was out in the wild, and in the hands of North Korean hackers, it would soon mutate into the WannaCry ransomware, shutting down hospitals in Britain, railways in Germany, and factories in China. The investigation had failed to stop the leak. Now, they were just watching the world burn. In the end, the United States government needed a body to display to the public. They needed a conviction to prove that their reach was still absolute, and the body they chose was Harold Martin. In a federal courtroom in Baltimore, the eccentric hoarder stood before the judge. He looked small, defeated, not like a mastermind who brought the NSA to its knees, but like a man crushed by the weight of his own compulsions. The prosecution painted him as a danger to national security. The defense painted him as a patriot with a mental health disorder. Harold Martin was sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. The Department of Justice released a statement declaring victory. They had caught the man who took the secrets home, but inside the intelligence community, there was no applause. There was only a heavy, uncomfortable silence, because everyone in the room knew the terrifying truth. Harold Martin was in handcuffs, But the shadow brokers were not. The entity that had mocked the NSA, the entity that had auctioned off America's cyber weapons, was never identified. They were never arrested. They were never put on trial. Imagine, if you will, the final verdict of this case. Not in a courtroom with a judge and jury, but in the court of reality. Picture a cold, sterile interrogation room. The concrete walls are bare, the air is stale. In the center of the room, a single spotlight beams down, cutting through the darkness. It illuminates a metal table and a chair. But the chair is empty. On the metal table, there is no confession letter. There is no laptop. There is only one object. A Guy Fawkes mask, the symbol of anonymous hackers everywhere. But this mask is different. It is cracked down the middle. One half is the smiling, ironic face of internet rebellion. The other half is missing, revealing nothing but the hollow darkness inside. This broken mask is the true verdict. It symbolizes the shattering of the illusion. The shadow brokers proved that the bad guys don't always wear hoodies in their basements. Sometimes they are nations. Sometimes they are ghosts. And sometimes they win. They emptied their Bitcoin wallets, deleted their accounts, and faded back into the static of the internet, leaving the NSA with a bruised ego and a broken armory. The spotlight in the interrogation room searches for a face, but it finds only dust motes dancing in the light. The hunt was frantic. The investigation was global, but the chair remains empty. The empty chair is haunting, but the silence it left behind is even louder. The shadow brokers didn't just embarrass the NSA, they changed the world. The tools they released, specifically the exploit known as EternalBlue, did not disappear into the void. They were picked up by other wolves in the dark. In May 2017, the WannaCry ransomware attack used the NSA's own stolen weapon to tear through the internet. It locked up computers in 150 countries. The National Health Service in Britain collapsed. Ambulances were diverted. Surgeries were canceled. Months later, the NotPetya attack used the same code to paralyze global shipping giants, causing $10 billion in damage. The irony is tragic. The weapons built by the United States to protect its interests were stolen, reverse-engineered, and turned against the innocent civilians they were sworn to defend. The shadow brokers proved that in the digital age, there is no such thing as a secure vault. If you build a weapon, someday, someone will steal it. And when they do, they won't care who gets hurt. Today, the identity of the shadow brokers remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the history of espionage. Were they a disgruntled insider, a Russian operation, or something entirely new, a chaotic force of the internet itself? We may never know. The ghost has vanished. But every time your computer forces a security update, every time you hear about a massive data breach, remember this story. The ghost isn't gone. It's just waiting. And somewhere in the darkness, between the lines of code that run our lives, the empty chair is still waiting for someone to sit down.